5 years had passed since humanity left the Milky Way, and the changes in both galaxies were beyond what anyone could have imagined. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez stood in the rebuilt human embassy on Neutral Station, the only remaining human presence in their former galaxy. Her job had become both simpler and more complex. Simpler because there was only one answer to every request from the old galaxy. More complex because those requests were becoming increasingly desperate. The morning reports, her aide Lieutenant Colonel Brian Murphy said as he handed her a datapad filled with communications from across the Milky Way. The Valkyrian Republic is requesting emergency food aid for the third time this month. The Korathi Collective is asking for medical assistance to deal with a plague outbreak that their own doctors can't control. The Nexari are reporting complete infrastructure failures in their outer territories. Rodriguez nodded as she read through the reports. The pattern was always the same: crisis, desperate requests for help, and the same polite but firm response that humanity was no longer available for consultation regarding Milky Way affairs. Any word from Andromeda? The weekly report came in yesterday, Murphy replied, his expression brightening. The Andromeda Federation was officially established with 49 human worlds and 23 coalition species as founding members. Population has reached 60 million humans, and the industrial output is now exceeding anything humanity achieved in the Milky Way. The contrast was striking. While the Milky Way struggled with cascading failures and social collapse, humanity was building something unprecedented in Andromeda. The Federation wasn't just another political alliance. It was a genuinely cooperative civilization where different species worked together as equals, rather than in the hierarchical system that had dominated galactic politics for millennia. There's something else, Murphy continued. We're receiving reports of individual worlds and systems attempting to break away from the Galactic Council. Some are trying to establish independent trade routes to Andromeda. Others are simply declaring independence and trying to manage on their own. Rodriguez wasn't surprised. The Galactic Council had maintained its authority for centuries by providing security and stability to its member worlds. When that security disappeared and the stability collapsed, the bonds holding the galaxy together began to weaken. Worlds that had been part of the galactic community for generations were now questioning whether that membership was worth the cost. Meanwhile, in the Galactic Council chambers, the atmosphere had changed from arrogant confidence to barely controlled panic. Chancellor Vexthari looked around at the half-empty chamber. Several species had simply stopped sending representatives after their governments collapsed and tried to maintain some semblance of authority. The situation reports continue to worsen, she announced to the remaining delegates. The Outer Rim territories have declared independence and formed their own confederation. The mining sectors in the Kepler region have been abandoned entirely. The trade routes that connected our civilizations have become too dangerous for civilian traffic. Prime Minister Calvos of the Valkyrian Republic looked older than her species' natural lifespan should have allowed. The stress of watching her civilization slowly collapse had taken its toll. My people are asking why we're still here. Why we're still pretending that this council has any real authority, when we can't protect our own worlds or feed our own people. The Korathi representatives' chittering had become a constant background noise of anxiety and fear. Our medical systems are failing. Our doctors are dying from diseases they don't know how to treat. Our people are beginning to blame the council for driving away the humans who could have saved them. That was the heart of the crisis that none of them wanted to acknowledge directly. The collapse of galactic civilization wasn't just about infrastructure, failures, or security problems. It was about the growing realization among ordinary citizens that their leaders had made a catastrophic mistake when they drove humanity away. Dr. Rachel Torres, still serving as an independent observer, stood to deliver what everyone knew would be her final report to the Council. 5 years ago, I warned you that humanity had become essential to galactic civilization. You dismissed that warning as propaganda. Today, I'm here to tell you that the galaxy as you knew it is ending. Chancellor Vextharius' tentacles writhed. with the agitation that had become her permanent state. Surely there must be some way to restore stability, some method to rebuild what has been lost. Dr. Torres shook her head. You could rebuild, but it would take generations, and it would require accepting responsibility for your own failures. It would mean admitting that you became dependent on a species you refused to respect. It would mean acknowledging that your arrogance destroyed the greatest period of peace and prosperity in galactic history. The truth was too bitter for most of the remaining delegates to accept. For centuries, the established species had taken pride in their wisdom, their experience, and their natural right to lead galactic civilization. The idea that they had been wrong, that they had driven away the very species that made their civilization possible, was too devastating to contemplate. General Scott Walker delivered his final security briefing with the professional detachment of a soldier reporting on someone else's war. The Marauder clans now control approximately 30% of what was once Council territory. Pirate activity has increased by 400%. Several worlds have simply gone dark. We don't know if they're under attack, suffering from complete system failures, or have just given up on maintaining contact with the outside galaxy. In Andromeda, President Jake Morrison stood before the newly constructed Federal Parliament building, addressing representatives from 67 human worlds and 41 coalition species. The ceremony marking the 5th anniversary of humanity's departure from the Milky Way had become a celebration of everything they had achieved since leaving. 5 years ago, we left our old galaxy not in anger, but in hope, Morrison said to the assembled delegates. We hoped that we could build something better, a civilization based on mutual respect, shared knowledge, and genuine cooperation. Today, I'm proud to say that we've exceeded even our most optimistic expectations. The Parliament building itself was a symbol of what the Federation represented. Designed by architects from 12 different species, it incorporated the best ideas from multiple civilizations while remaining uniquely beautiful. The technology that powered it combined human engineering with coalition innovations, creating something that neither could have achieved alone. Admiral Harrison, now serving as Secretary of Exploration for the Federation, presented the latest reports from deep space missions. Our exploration fleets have identified over 200 potentially habitable worlds. We've made peaceful contact with 17 additional species that are interested in joining the Federation. Our scientific research programs are making discoveries that are revolutionizing our understanding of physics, biology, and engineering. Captain Santos, representing the Federation Defense Force, had equally impressive news. Our security is maintained through cooperation rather than domination. The coalition species have shared defense technologies that make our ships and stations virtually impregnable. We've had no hostile encounters because our first contact protocols emphasize diplomacy and mutual benefit rather than territorial expansion. The contrast with the Milky Way's approach to civilization could not have been starker. Where the old galaxy had been built on hierarchy and competition, the Federation thrived on cooperation and mutual respect. Where the Galactic Council had maintained order through force and intimidation, the Federation achieved stability through genuine partnership. As the ceremony concluded, Morrison received a private communication from Ambassador Rodriguez on neutral station. The message was brief but significant. 3 more worlds had declared independence from the Galactic Council in the past week, and 2 of them were actively seeking contact with the Andromeda Federation. Morrison considered the request carefully. The Federation could easily accept these worlds as members or trading partners. They had the resources, the technology, and the defensive capabilities to protect new members from the chaos that was consuming the Milky Way, but accepting refugees from their old galaxy would also mean taking responsibility for cleaning up the mess that the Galactic Council had created. After consulting with the Federal Council, Morrison drafted a response that embodied the principles on which the Federation had been built. The Andromeda Federation would welcome any world or species that genuinely embraced the values of cooperation and mutual respect. They would provide humanitarian aid to prevent unnecessary suffering, but they would not intervene to save the Galactic council or restore the old order that had driven humanity away in the first place. The galaxy that had once dismissed humanity as too young and inexperienced was now learning what it meant to face the universe without them. Meanwhile, humanity and their new partners were building a civilization that would eventually span multiple galaxies, founded on the simple principle that all intelligent species deserved to be treated as equals. The age of the Galactic Council was ending, but the age of the Andromeda Federation was just beginning. Captain Alex Chun stood on the observation deck of the colony ship, Pioneer's Dawn, and watched the first human cities rise from the surface of New Terra. The sight filled him with wonder that still surprised him after 2 years in the Andromeda galaxy. The buildings weren't just functional, they were beautiful, reaching toward alien stars with an elegance that spoke of hope rather than desperation. "Construction report," he called to his chief engineer. Commander Linda Ross looked up. From her tablet, a smile on her face that had become common among the human colonists. "The primary settlements are 3 weeks ahead of schedule. The agricultural domes are producing enough food to support twice our current population. The first generation of children born in Andromeda are healthy and thriving, and our medical facilities are reporting 0 cases of the diseases that plagued us in the Milky Way." Chun nodded, but his attention was caught by something else in the report. "What about the mining operations?" "The asteroid belt mining is exceeding all projections by 40%, Ross replied. "The mineral compositions here are unlike anything we found in our old galaxy. Our scientists think we've discovered materials that could revolutionize our technology." That was the real surprise of Andromeda. When humanity had left the Milky Way, they had expected to struggle for years just to establish basic survival. Instead, they had found a galaxy that seemed designed to support human expansion. The planets were more hospitable, the resources were more abundant, and the opportunities seemed endless. Admiral Paul Harrison, now serving as the head of the Andromeda Colonial Authority, walked into the observation lounge carrying a data pad full of reports that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. "Alex, I need to update you on the latest developments." Chun turned from the window. "Good news or bad news?" "Depends on how you look at it," Harrison replied. "The exploration. Fleets have confirmed habitable worlds in 47 systems. We've established successful colonies on 31 planets. Our population growth is exceeding every projection we made, and our industrial capacity is already approaching what we had in the Milky Way." Captain Maria Santos, Harrison's aide, joined them with her own set of reports. Really interesting. News is about our new neighbors. The Vanguard fleet has made contact with the Andromeda Coalition, and their response has been completely different from what we experienced with the Galactic Council." Chun raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "They actually want to work with us as equals," Santos replied. "No condescension, no lectures about being too young or inexperienced. They're interested in trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and mutual defense pacts. They've even invited human representatives to join their governing council with full voting rights." The contrast with their experience in the Milky Way was so stark that it was almost hard to believe. The Andromeda Coalition consisted of 12 species that had been working together for centuries, but they had approached humanity with genuine curiosity rather than dismissive arrogance. They were interested in what humans could contribute, but they were also eager to share their own knowledge and technology. Dr. Kevin Wright, the chief scientist of the Andromeda Project, entered the lounge with news that was even more exciting. "We've completed the preliminary analysis of the dark matter concentrations in this galaxy. The energy potential is staggering. We could power our entire civilization for thousands of years with just a fraction of what's available here." Harrison shook his head in amazement. "It's almost like the universe is rewarding us for having the courage to leave." Dr. Michelle Parker, monitoring communications from her station in the command center, appeared on the wall display with an update that brought everyone back to reality. "We're still receiving regular reports from our observers in the Milky Way. The situation there continues to deteriorate." Chun felt a pang of sadness mixed with vindication. "How bad is it?" The Galactic Council has sent their 23rd request for emergency assistance, Parker replied. They're now offering territorial concessions that would give humanity control over entire sectors. Food riots have spread to over 50 worlds. The medical crisis has reached the point where several species are facing potential extinction from diseases that were easily treatable when human doctors were available. Santos pulled up a holographic display, showing the current state of the Milky Way. The red zones marking areas of critical failure had spread across most of the galaxy map. The security situation is even worse. The Marauder clans have formed a confederation and are claiming entire sectors as their territory. Civilian shipping has basically stopped in the outer regions. Chun studied the display with professional interest rather than emotional attachment. The Milky Way felt like ancient history now, a place where humanity had spent decades trying to prove their worth to species that were never going to accept them as equals. Any response to their requests? Standard reply, Harrison answered. We've informed them that humanity is no longer available for consultation regarding Milky Way affairs. If they want to establish diplomatic relations with the Andromeda Colonial Authority, they can contact us through proper channels. The message was clear, but not cruel. Humanity wasn't actively trying to hurt the species they had left behind, but they weren't going to save them either. The galaxy that had rejected humanity would have to find its own solutions to its problems. Dr. Wright brought up another display showing the progress of human expansion in Andromeda. The most interesting development is how quickly we're advancing. Technologically, without the political constraints and bureaucratic limitations we faced in the Milky Way, our research and development has accelerated dramatically. Chung could see what he meant. The human colonies weren't just recreating what they had lost, they were building something entirely new and better. The cities rising on New Terra incorporated design principles that had never been allowed in the politically sensitive environment of the Galactic Council territories. The industrial facilities being constructed used technologies that combined human innovation with knowledge freely shared by their new coalition partners. There's something else, Santos added. We've received preliminary reports from deep space exploration missions. The surveys suggest that Andromeda contains resources and phenomena that don't exist in the Milky Way. Our xenobiologists think they've discovered entirely new forms of life that could revolutionize our understanding of the universe. Harrison looked around at his staff, seeing the excitement and optimism that had replaced the frustration and anger they had felt during their last years in the Milky Way. You know what the real irony is? The Galactic Council spent 50 years telling us we were too young and inexperienced to handle complex responsibilities. Now we're building a civilization that will probably surpass anything they ever achieved. Shun nodded, thinking about the reports from their new coalition partners. The species in Andromeda had welcomed humanity not because they needed help, but because they recognized the value of diversity and cooperation. They had seen human innovations and been eager to learn from them, just as they had been eager to teach humans about their own discoveries and technologies. The latest population projections show that we'll have over 50 million humans living in Andromeda within the next 5 years, Parker reported. The birth rate in the colonies is the highest in human history. People are optimistic about the future in a way they never were in the Milky Way. Chun understood why. In the Milky Way, humans had always been fighting for acceptance, trying to prove that they deserved a seat at the table. In Andromeda, they were building the table themselves, along with partners who valued their contributions and respected their capabilities. As the pioneers, Dawn prepared for its next mission to establish colonies in the outer spiral. Chun took one last look at New Terra. The planet was thriving, its cities growing, its people happy and productive. Humanity had found something in Andromeda that they had never been allowed to have in the Milky Way. The freedom to reach their full potential. The galaxy that had rejected them was learning to survive without them, while humanity was discovering just how much they could achieve when they were finally free to try. The Galactic Council chambers had never been so quiet. Chancellor Vexthari of the Zephyrian Confederacy looked around at the empty seats where human representatives had once sat, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. 8 months had passed since the humans left, and the galaxy was falling apart. "The reports are here," she announced to the assembled delegates, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "The numbers are worse than we predicted." Prime Minister Zara Kelvos of the Valkyrian Republic shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her scales had been stuck in the deep purple of distress for weeks now, and everyone could see the strain on her face. "My people are asking questions I cannot answer. The food riots in the Outer Rim territories have spread to 12 worlds. The agricultural systems that fed billions are operating at less than 30% capacity." The Korathi representative clicked his mandibles nervously. "The medical crisis in our territories has reached critical levels. Without human doctors and medical technology, we're seeing diseases that were eliminated decades ago. The plague containment protocols that human scientists developed are failing, because none of our people know how to maintain them." Chancellor Vexthari pulled up the holographic display that showed the current state of galactic civilization. Red zones marked areas of critical failure, yellow zones showed regions in decline, and green zones indicated stable areas. There was very little green left on the map. "The Kepler sector mining operations have completely shut down," she continued. "The asteroids that provided rare metals for our technology are now inaccessible because we don't know how to operate the extraction equipment. The Nexari crystal cities are experiencing power failures that are cascading through their entire civilization." The Nexari representative pulsed with dim, erratic light. "Our people have never experienced darkness in their cities. The power systems that humans built were supposed to be maintenance-free, but they require knowledge that we do not possess. Our engineers are working around the clock, but they cannot solve problems they do not understand." Dr. Rachel Torres, one of the few humans who had remained in the galaxy as an independent observer, stood up to address the council. She had been watching the crisis unfold with a mixture of sadness and professional interest. "Honorable delegates, I warned you about this possibility in my report 18 months ago. The integration of human systems into galactic infrastructure was deeper than anyone realized." The Zephyrian Chancellor's tentacles writhed with agitation. "Your report was dismissed as human propaganda designed to make your species seem more important than it actually was." "And yet here we are," Dr. Torres replied calmly. "The systems are failing exactly as I predicted they would. The food shortages, the medical crises, the infrastructure breakdowns, none of this is happening because humans built faulty systems. It's happening because you never learned how to maintain them." The truth was more embarrassing than any of the council members wanted to admit. For 50 years, they had allowed humans to solve their problems, improve their systems, and maintain their infrastructure. They had told themselves that they were doing humans a favor by letting them contribute to galactic civilization. They had never realized that they were becoming completely dependent on human expertise. General Scott Walker, the human military attaché who had also remained behind, stood to deliver his report. "The security situation is deteriorating rapidly. The Savage Nebula has become a pirate haven. The Marauder clans have taken control of 3 entire sectors. Civilian shipping has been reduced by 60% because merchant vessels are too afraid to travel through areas that were once protected by human patrol fleets." The Valkyrian Prime Minister's scales turned an even deeper shade of purple. "How many of our people have been killed or captured?" "The official count is over 3,000 dead and 1,200 captured," Walker replied. "But those are just the confirmed numbers. Many ships have simply disappeared in areas where human patrols used to maintain order." The Korathi representative's chittering became more frantic. "Our trade routes are being disrupted. Our colonies are requesting emergency protection. Our people are beginning to question whether the Council can still protect them." That was the heart of the problem, and everyone in the chamber knew it. The Galactic Council had spent decades taking credit for the peace and prosperity that human efforts had created. They had presented themselves as wise leaders who had built a stable, secure civilization. Now that the humans were gone, it was becoming clear that the Council had been taking credit for work they had never done. "What about the worlds that are trying to contact humanity directly?" asked the Zephyrian Chancellor. Dr. Torres consulted her datapad. 17 worlds have sent expeditions toward the Andromeda galaxy. They're attempting to establish independent contact with human colonies. Several more are considering similar actions. The implications were staggering. The authority of the Galactic Council was based on the idea that they could provide security, stability, and prosperity for their member worlds. If those worlds started making their own deals with humanity, bypassing the Council entirely, the entire structure of galactic government would collapse. "The Outer Rim territories are talking about forming their own confederation," General Walker added. "They're saying that if the Council can't protect them or feed them, they'll find someone who can." Prime Minister Kelvos looked around the chamber. "Desperately, what do the humans want? What would it take for them to return?" Dr. Torres shook her head. "You're still asking the wrong questions. Humans didn't leave to make demands or to force negotiations. They left because they realized that no amount of contribution would ever earn them the respect they deserved. They're not coming back because they're building something better." The Nexari representative pulsed with confused patterns of light. "Better than galactic civilization? Better than the peace and prosperity we've built together?" "The peace and prosperity that humans built while you took credit for it," Dr. Torres corrected. "And yes, they're building something better. The early reports from Andromeda suggest that they've established contact with species that actually treat them as equals. They're forming partnerships based on mutual respect rather than condescension." Chancellor Vextari slumped in her chair. "So what do we do? How do we survive without them?" "You learn," Dr. Torres said simply. "You take responsibility for your own civilization. You train your own people to maintain the systems that humans built. You develop your own solutions to your own problems. You do what humans have been doing for 50 years. You work together to solve problems instead of waiting for someone else to fix them." The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in their history, the established powers of the galaxy were being forced to confront the reality of their own incompetence. They had become so dependent on human expertise that they had forgotten how to manage their own affairs. "The question is not whether humanity will return," Dr. Torres continued. "The question is whether you can build something new from the ruins of what you've lost. The galaxy is changing, and you can either change with it or be left behind." As the council session ended, the delegates filed out in silence. Each of them was returning to worlds that were struggling, to people who were suffering, to civilizations that were failing. They had spent decades dismissing humanity as junior partners, and now they were learning what it meant to face the galaxy alone. The age of galactic civilization as they knew it was ending. What would replace it was still unclear. But one thing was certain: it would be built without human help. 6 months had passed since Jake Morrison walked out of the Galactic Council chambers, and the galaxy was beginning to understand what humanity's departure really meant. Commander Ryan Brooks stood on the bridge of the colony ship New Frontier, watching the final human mining operation in the Kepler sector being dismantled piece by piece. The scale of the human withdrawal was something nobody had expected, not even the humans themselves. When they first started planning for this possibility 2 years ago, they thought it would be a simple matter of packing up and leaving. They had no idea how deeply they had become part of the galaxy's daily life. "Status report," Brooks called. To his navigation officer, Lieutenant Amy Foster looked up from her console, her face showing the exhaustion that had marked all of them during these long months. "The last civilian transport from the agricultural stations just cleared the system. The Centauri cluster harvest is complete, and the farming equipment is being loaded onto the cargo haulers. We should be ready to jump to the Andromeda staging area within the week." Brooks nodded, but his mind was on the reports that had been coming in from across human space. The withdrawal wasn't just about pulling back military forces or closing diplomatic offices. It was about shutting down an entire civilization's worth of infrastructure that had somehow become essential to galactic life, When humans first joined the galactic community 50 years ago, they had done what humans always did. They saw problems and fixed them. They saw inefficiencies and improved them. They saw people suffering and helped them. Nobody had planned for humans to become so important to daily life across the galaxy. It had just happened, one small improvement at a time. The communication system crackled to life. "New Frontier, this is Admiral Karen Wells aboard the Liberation. We need to talk." Brooks activated the view screen and Admiral Wells appeared. She looked as tired as everyone else, but there was something else in her expression. Something that might have been satisfaction. "Admiral," Brooks said, "how are the other sectors proceeding?" "Better than expected," Wells replied. "The outer rim evacuations are complete. The medical stations in the Nexari territories have been shut down and evacuated. The agricultural centers that were feeding half the galaxy are now offline. The manufacturing facilities that were producing everything from starship components to medical supplies have been dismantled." Colonel Steve Martinez, Wells' aide, appeared beside her on the screen. "Sir, we're receiving urgent communications from the Galactic Council. They want to negotiate." Wells' expression didn't change. "What kind of negotiations?" "They're offering full membership rights, permanent seats on the Security Council, and territorial concessions in 3 sectors. They're also requesting immediate restoration of food production in the Outer Rim territories. Apparently, there are already reports of shortages." Brooks wasn't surprised. The agricultural stations that humans had built in the Outer Rim had been feeding billions of beings across dozens of worlds. The humans had taken over food production in those regions because the original inhabitants had been struggling with crop failures and soil problems. Human agricultural engineers had turned barren worlds into garden paradises that produced more food than anyone thought possible. "Any word from the medical centers?" Brooks asked. Martinez consulted his datapad. "The Karathi are reporting critical shortages of medical supplies. The Valkyrian Republic is asking for emergency assistance with their plague containment protocols. The Nexari crystal cities are experiencing power failures for the first time in centuries." Wells shook her head. "The same species that told us we were too inexperienced to understand complex medical procedures are now begging us to come back and save their people. The same aliens who said our engineering was too primitive to handle their power systems are now sitting in the dark." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. For decades, the established galactic species had treated humans like enthusiastic children who were trying to help but didn't really understand what they were doing. They had accepted human help, human technology, and human expertise while constantly reminding everyone that humans were still the new species who had a lot to learn. Communications Officer Janet Pierce looked up from her station. "Admiral, we're getting reports from the patrol fleets. The Savage Nebula is showing increased pirate activity. The Marauder clans are moving into sectors that were previously under human patrol." Wells' expression darkened. "How many civilian vessels have been attacked?" 17 confirmed attacks in the past month, Pierce replied. 3 cargo ships destroyed, 2 passenger transports captured. The Galactic Council is requesting immediate military assistance. Brooks felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. The human patrol fleets had been maintaining order in the more dangerous sectors of the galaxy for years. The Galactic Council had been happy to let humans handle the dirty work of fighting pirates and raiders while they focused on more important political matters. Now those same dangerous sectors were becoming no-go zones for civilian traffic. "What's our response to the Council's requests?" Brooks asked. Wells smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "We've informed them that humanity is no longer available for consultation regarding galactic affairs. We've also reminded them that they have all the documentation and training materials for every system we built. If they can't maintain their own infrastructure, that's not our problem." The truth was more complex than that, and everyone knew it. The galactic species could have learned to maintain human-built systems. The technology wasn't beyond their capabilities. The problem was that they had never bothered to learn. Why invest in training your own people when humans would do the work for free? The Zephyrian Chancellor sent a personal message, Martinez added. She's asking what it would take for humanity to reconsider the withdrawal. Wells' expression didn't change. Tell her that humanity has already moved on. We're not coming back to a galaxy that treated us like junior partners for 50 years. We're building something new, something better. Through the view screen, Brooks could see the final pieces of human infrastructure being loaded onto transport ships. Mining equipment that had been extracting resources from asteroids for decades. Medical facilities that had been saving lives across multiple species. Agricultural systems that had been feeding billions of beings. Admiral, Brooks said quietly, do you think we're doing the right thing? All those people who are going to suffer because we're not there to help them. Wells was quiet for a long moment. Ryan, we spent 50 years helping them. We saved their civilizations, improved their lives, and shared our technology freely. And what did we get? We got told to sit quietly while the adults made the important decisions. We got treated like children who should be grateful for the chance to serve. She paused, looking out at the ships carrying human civilization toward a new galaxy. Those people aren't going to suffer because we're leaving. They're going to suffer because their leaders were too proud to treat us as equals. They had 50 years to learn how to maintain the systems we built. They chose not to. That's on them. Not us. The New Frontier's engines began to power up for the jump to Andromeda. Brooks took one last look at the sector that had been humanity's home for decades. They weren't leaving in anger anymore. They were leaving with purpose. The galaxy that had rejected them as equals would have to learn to survive without them. As the stars shifted around them, Brooks wondered what the galaxy would look like in a year, or 5 years, or 10. But that was no longer humanity's concern. They had a new galaxy to explore, new civilizations to meet, and new problems to solve. And maybe, just maybe, they would find species that were ready to treat them as the equals they had always been. Jake Morrison looked around the massive chamber and felt his patience finally break. The Galactic Council had been talking in circles for 3 hours now, and nothing had changed. The same old arguments, the same dismissive attitudes, the same condescending smiles from species that thought humans were too young to understand real politics. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the crystal floor. The sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot, and suddenly every alien eye in the room was on him. Captain Lisa Hayes, sitting beside him, tensed but stayed ready. She knew that look on Morrison's face. "We're done here," Morrison said. His voice carrying across the silent chamber, the Zephyrian Chancellor's tentacles writhed nervously. Her purple skin had turned a darker shade, which Morrison had learned meant she was worried. "Ambassador Morrison, please sit down. We can discuss this matter further." Morrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Discuss? We've been discussing for 3 years. Every time we bring up the Outer Rim Development Initiative, you tell us it's too complex for humans to understand. Every time we offer to share our medical technology, you say we need more experience first. Every time we suggest improvements to your defense systems, you pat us on the head and tell us to leave the important decisions to the grown-ups." The Karathi representative's chittering grew louder. His insect-like body clicked and buzzed as he tried to interrupt. "The human species has made valuable contributions to galactic society. No one denies this. Valuable contributions?" Morrison's voice rose. "We've saved the Valkyrian Republic from the plague that was killing millions of their people. We stopped the war between the Nexari and the Korathi that was tearing apart 2 entire sectors. We've shared technology that has made life better for billions of beings across dozens of worlds. And what do we get? A pat on the head and a reminder that we're still the new kids in the galaxy." Captain Hayes stood up beside him. She activated her communicator with a quick tap. "All human personnel, prepare for immediate departure. This is not a drill." The chamber erupted in dozens of alien languages. The Valkyrian Prime Minister's scales had turned bright red, which meant she was angry or scared, maybe both. "Ambassador Morrison, you cannot simply leave. There are protocols, procedures that must be followed." Morrison turned to face her directly. "Protocols? You mean the same protocols that keep humans from having any real voice in galactic affairs?" The same procedures that ensure we're always consulted last and listened to least? The Nexari representative pulsed with bright blue light. Morrison had learned that meant confusion or distress. Your species' departure would create significant disruption. Surely we can find a solution that works for everyone. That's exactly the problem, Morrison said. You only care about disruption when it affects you. For 3 years, we've watched you make decisions that hurt innocent people because you were too proud to listen to human suggestions. The mining crisis in the Kepler sector could have been prevented if you'd listened to our warnings 6 months ago. The food shortages in the Outer Rim territories could have been avoided if you'd approved our agricultural improvements, instead of spending 8 months debating whether humans were qualified to grow food. Hayes was coordinating with human forces across the galaxy through her communicator. Phase 1 is now active. All civilian operations are to begin immediate shutdown procedures. Military assets maintain defensive positions until all personnel are clear. The Karathi delegates' chittering became almost frantic. You cannot abandon your responsibilities to the galactic community. There are agreements, treaties, obligations that bind your species to this council. Morrison pulled out a data pad and placed it on the crystal table. Every treaty, every agreement, every obligation, we've fulfilled them all. In fact, we've gone far beyond what was required. We've given more to this galaxy than any species in its history, and we've asked for nothing in return except to be treated as equals. The Zephyrian Chancellor's tentacles were now moving in rapid, agitated patterns. What do you want? What would it take for humanity to reconsider this hasty decision? It's not hasty, Morrison said. We've been preparing for this possibility for 2 years. We hoped it wouldn't come to this, but we're not naive. We knew that some species would never see us as anything more than useful children who should be. Grateful for the chance to serve, the Valkyrian Prime Minister tried again. Your species has a bright future in the galactic community. With time, your voice will grow stronger, your influence will expand. Time? Morrison shook his head. How much time? Another century? Another millennium? We've watched species with half our population and 1/10 of our contributions get full voting rights while we're still treated as junior members. We've seen our best ideas dismissed because they came from humans, only to be implemented years later when someone else suggested them. Hayes finished her communications and looked at Morrison. All stations report ready for departure. We're just waiting for your word. Morrison looked around the chamber one last time. He saw fear in many of the alien faces, confusion in others, and anger in a few, but he didn't see respect. He didn't see recognition. He saw the same patronizing attitudes that had driven humanity to this point. The human species is formally withdrawing from the Galactic Council, he announced. We're also withdrawing from all associated treaties, agreements, and obligations. Effective immediately, all human personnel will be recalled from galactic service. All human-operated facilities will be shut down. All human-provided services will be discontinued. The chamber exploded in chaos. Dozens of species were all talking at once, their voices creating a cacophony that would have been overwhelming if Morrison hadn't been expecting it. Through it all, he walked calmly toward the exit. With Hayes and the human security detail forming up around him, the Nexari representative managed to make himself heard above the noise. You're making a mistake that will harm billions of innocent beings. The systems you've built, the services you provide, they're essential to galactic civilization? Morrison stopped at the doorway and turned back. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided we weren't important enough to have a real voice in how those systems are used. As the human delegation left the chamber, Morrison could hear the arguments beginning behind them. Some species were calling for immediate action to stop the human withdrawal. Others were demanding to know how they'd become so dependent on human services. A few were already talking about the disasters that would follow if humanity actually went through with their threat. Morrison smiled grimly as they walked toward the transport bays. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Humanity was leaving, and the galaxy was about to learn what it was like to manage without them.